Yeah, we just hit that mark.
Just hit it.
We'll be starting just a few minutes late.
I'm just gonna pass this off to you. I'm gonna find somewhere comfortable to click it and
Hey, Chief.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
How you doing?
Good. There's also a little bit of water off. Take all this stuff also. My phone will ring 100 times during lunch.
All right. Thank you all for coming out today. We have a few people online and a few people still incoming right now. Thank you all for joining us here in person. We're always very excited to host these lunch and learn events because you get some education and some food. So always a good time. Today we have Robert Trigg here to talk from Jet Lending. He's a great presentation for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and let him just take the floor. Stay tuned afterwards for some announcements and deal pitching. All yours.
Let's test it. Oh, it's on. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing today? All right. Thank y'all for showing up. Let's see here. All right. So how many people know about hard money loans? A little bit? Okay. Well, today I'm going to teach y'all a little bit about hard money, but the main thing I want to emphasize today is where does the train run off the track and how are investors, the biggest mistakes they're making as far as finding investment properties or therefore not finding investment properties. The biggest thing that we're finding right now in the hard money space is that there's a lot of investors that don't know how to go find deals. And that's one of the biggest things because they're relying on somebody else to do the hard work for them. And that hard work is eating up all the equity. And we'll get into that as far as why that's important now versus why it was important, least important a year and a half ago or a year ago. I'm Rob Trigg. I'm the Director of Loan Operations with Jet Lending. I've been with the company for almost 7 years. We were established in 2004. We're an asset-based lender. These are all of our stats. Basically, we're approaching being 20 years in the business. That 514 million has gone up considerably in the last 2 months when I made these slides. So this is just a little out of date. What we're going to go over today, what is hard money? When do you use hard money? What is the purpose? Where you can learn and find out more information. That's our main topic, though, as I discussed, is where does the train run off the tracks? Where are your showstoppers? Okay, hard money lending. It's asset-based loan based off the asset and not the income or credit. Used to purchase real estate for purpose of rehabbing, sell for a profit, or hold as a rental, short-term or long-term. Here in Houston, there's been a real big influx of short-term rentals, especially near the medical center, Third Ward, in that area. It's very, very, very profitable in there. I mean, give you a scenario. You've got a out-of-town patient that comes into town. They're getting cancer treatment down there at the medical center. Would they rather stay in a hotel or would they rather stay in an Airbnb that has a nice relaxing pool and they're able to get their cancer treatments and come home and relax to some place that's more homey than staying in a hotel. That's one of the biggest sellers down there in that area, is the convenience and the fact that, and comfort. I've got a couple of clients that have done really well in that area. They've got, there's a friend of mine that's got a duplex down there. He's got a pool there. I think he's averaging anywhere from 16 to 20K a month just on that duplex. Yeah, just one property. It has a pool, like I'm saying in that scenario. So short-term rentals are very profitable, and using hard money to get there. You're probably saying, well, how do I make that happen? Well, the biggest thing you got to learn is something that I like to call vitamin E. Building in vitamin E up front. Anybody know what vitamin E stands for? And it's not the vitamin you go and take at Walgreens. Anybody? Equity. Vitamin equity. You've got to build that in up front, especially now versus a year ago. Why? Anybody tell me why you need to build in that equity now versus a year ago? Anybody want to take a stab at it? No? Your interest rates have gone up. Your long-term interest rates have gone up. So what you bought a property for a year ago is not necessarily what you could sell a property now for. Based upon the interest rates. What you can afford a year ago is not what you can afford now. I mean, that's nationwide, because we all know Americans don't buy on what they can afford. They buy what on their monthly payment is going to be. That's 90% of how people buy their houses. What's my monthly payment? Not what can I afford and pay off in a reasonable time. But that's okay. That's the American dream, is to have a 30-year mortgage and sit there and pay on it till you die, but as an investor, you don't want that. You want to build in that equity up front. So how do you do that? I got a call this morning. I'm not kidding. And I'm kind of glad I got this call this morning. New investor's done one investment property. He's like, Rob, and nothing against wholesalers at all. I'm not saying anything bad. Wholesalers are great. Got a lot of good friends that are wholesalers. He said, I can't find a deal to where I'm not bringing money to the table. I was like, well, how are you finding your deals? He's like, well, I've got a couple of wholesalers. I was like, there's your problem right there. I was like, if you want to bring nothing to the table, you need to be the wholesaler to yourself. You've got to go out door knocking. And he said, well, I just don't have time for that. I'm like, you want to be an investor, right? He's like, well, yeah, I want to be an investor. I was like, well, nobody said that this is an easy task. I was like, if you want to make a lot of money, you've got to put in the leg hours. You've got to go out there and actively be an investor instead of relying on somebody else to do the groundwork for you. And there's so many times that I've had this conversation over the last 6 years of, oh, well, I've got a great relationship with wholesalers, but they're building they're taking all the equity out of the property by wholesaling it to me. I'm like, well, that's their job. I mean, you can't hate them for the fact that they went and did the work and got the property under contract, and now they want to make a profit. That's the whole point of a wholesaler's mentality, is go buy it, leave enough spread that you can sell it to a long-term or short-term rental, to where they can rehab it and put a tenant in there, or leave enough room in there for somebody to flip it. Most of the time, wholesalers are going to eat up most of the equity that you have to be a buy and hold person. Most of the time. I mean, there's some that are not, I'm not going to use the word greedy, but there's some out there that are not going to put so much in the deal that you can't make a profit off of. So that's how you've got to approach this as an investor. If you're watching online, or if in here, again, if there's people online, we'll have a Q&A after this. So, keep your questions, write them down, put them in the chat, and we'll answer those questions at the end. When do I use hard money? Well, this is a list of a lot of ways you can use it for fix and flip, buy, fix and hold, short-term rentals, small balance commercial. Yes, we do. We love commercial properties. We love to do land, large portions of land. There's a lot of value in buying 80 to 100 acres and splitting them up into 10-acre plots, doing the road work and the electrical and actually putting all that work into it and then selling those off in 10-acre plots, and you can make a large fortune in that. You buy, I've got a client right now, he's buying 80 acres. He bought it for $800,000. He plans to split them all up into 10-acre plots, and he's going to sell them off, and his return on investment is somewhere around $3 million. So you take $800,000 and we're doing the loan on it, and you're gonna sit there and break it out. At the end of the day, you got to pay $800,000. You're putting $2 million in your back pocket. Now, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. But again, anybody said that investing was easy, well, they either have not failed, and you have to fail as an investor in order to be successful. I honestly believe that. You have to take your hits. Anybody tells you that they've never failed as an investor, they're either lying or they're not a true investor. It's just the truth. I mean, you're going to take your hits. But try to get back on track here. Long story short, we love commercial properties. We love land deals, the larger land deals. We don't want a 4,500 or 5,000 square foot lot that's worth $20,000. That's not something we're interested in. Transactional funding for wholesalers that are watching. We love transactional funding. I think that's a product that's not used a lot. Anybody know what transactional funding is? I'll go over it real quick. Let's say you are in the wholesaling industry, and that's your primary source of investing or building your wealth. Transactional funding is a way that you can assign a property, and it's basically a blind closing to where you sell it to her, but she can't see what your actual assignment fee is because it's a double closing. So it's a way to hide. It's a way to hide your portion of your profit that you're going to make. And we do those. We do those quite often, but not as often as you think. Cash out refinances. We got long-term, short-term money for any investment property you've got. These are DSCR loans, which they're non-stated income loans. So any investor out there that's like, hey, I don't qualify for a long-term loan. I've got good credit. I've got cash reserves, but I'm an investor. I write everything off every year, so I take a loss. So my debt to income ratio is off, and I'm not able to qualify for traditional financing. Well, come to Jet Lending. We are a non-stated income long-term loan financing company. So we don't ask for your W-2s. We don't care what your debt to income ratio is. We care, is it a good piece of collateral, and does it meet the minimum debt service cover ratio? All right. We do some new construction, very tight category to fit in, and we'll get into that a little bit later. What's the process? First and foremost, establish relationship with the loan officer. I'm going to dive into this a little bit deeper. You need to establish relationships with 5 people in this industry as an investor. 1, a lender. 2, an investor-friendly title company. 3, insurance agents. 4, you need to build a great relationship with a general contractor or subcontractors. You have to build your relationships with every one of those people. And number 5, I dare say that anybody that's in this industry as an investor needs a good mentor. somebody they can call for advice, a really good mentor, and not somebody that says they're a guru, somebody that is an actual mentor that's going to take care of you. Let's see here. Well, we can underwrite a property in 24 to 48 hours, can close in 3 days from clear to close. We do a full market analysis on the property prior to you even ordering an appraisal. I'm going to breeze through this a little bit because I really want to get to the issues of how the train runs off the tracks. What are we going to look at on an asset? We're going to look at the asset itself, make sure it's not a tear down, make sure it's not a complete disaster. We're going to look at what the ARV is. That's the after repair value. We're going to make sure your repairs are good and you've done your due diligence. I will tell you this, there's a lot of investors out there that I have gotten phone calls from. They'll say, hey, Rob, I want to buy this house. I'm like, great, let's take a look at it. Have you walked the property? No, but I've seen an email. I'm like, you telling me you've never been inside the property, but you're ready to do a loan on an investment that you've never even looked at? There is a ton of things that email is not telling you. One, go look at the area, see if other properties are being rehabbed in that area. If not, then that's a good indication that this may not be a startup area yet. But hey, you may be with one of the ones that pulls the trigger on that street or in that area. Number two, you haven't walked the property. What if they're hiding that half the back of the house has been on fire? Literally, that's happened. Been completely on fire, and you've never walked it, but half the house is missing. Or there's a big hole in the ceiling, but they never show you that picture. But you're ready to do a loan on it. Like rainwater, debris, everything's been coming into that house in the center of it. That is not a good approach as an investor. You've got to do your own due diligence, and don't rely on your contractor to go look at the property and you never step foot on it. As an investor, you've got to be able to make that happen. You've got to slow down and say, hey, I'm going to go look at this before I make an offer or before I even send it to a lender. And the ability to refinance an exit plan. This is one thing that I really want to touch on because this is kind of where the train rolls off the tracks. I'm going to give you a couple of stories. Great investor, great guy, comes to me and says, Rob, I've got this great project down in LaPorte. I'm going to rehab it, does a great rehab on it, but ends up using his credit cards instead of his cash. Runs up all of his credit limits. Every single one of his credit cards are maxed out. He gets to the end of the rehab. Still has a little bit of cash left, but not a lot. But guess what happened to him? Anybody take a guess? And he wanted to keep this as a short-term rental. Anybody? He couldn't get a loan. Why couldn't he get a loan? There you go. So his credit card debt was so high, so he had a 700-ish credit score when he started. It had dipped down all the way to 620. This is a real thing. This is not a one-time occurrence. If you're starting any project and you're a seasoned investor or a first-time investor, if you have any issues with capital, liquidity, cash, and you're saying, I'm going to put this all on my credit card, and you have the determination that you want this to be either long-term or a short-term rental when you start this project, and you have that as your exit plan, if you do not have the reserves, you need to second guess yourself. And I'm not telling you not to do the property, but you need to make sure that you have enough liquidity to be able to get through that rehab and get through it effectively so that you can put that property to work as a long or short-term rental and be able to refinance out of a hard money loan. Because the last thing you want to do is get to the end of your project with your plan in place and not be able to execute that plan. That is a one major way that the train runs off the tracks. And we're seeing that a lot here lately, especially considering what's happened in the last year as far as interest rates increasing. The long-term lenders are pulling back their requirements and making it more, I wouldn't say hard, but they're making it more checks and balances, I'll say, to be able to qualify for those long-term loans, especially on the DSCR or your long-term and asset-based lending strategies. They're pulling back the reins a little bit because interest rates have tightened up. Things to look out for. Will you be able to refinance once rehab is done? As I just talked about, you've really got to pay attention to your exit strategy and have multiple exit strategies and be able to pivot with the market. As we saw in 2022, we started the year off, interest rates were what? January of last year. Anybody tell me? Low 2.75 to 3. And then somewhere around May, June, July, August, ticked up. Ticked up throughout the whole year. So, I mean, you're buying a property at max value in January and you're starting to flip it or getting ready to sell it, and you can't sell the property because now you've got too much in it because you didn't put that vitamin E to work when you are purchasing the property. There's one thing in a real estate transaction that the investor is able to control. What is that? One thing. How much you buy the property for. That's the only thing that you control in a real estate transaction is how much you buy that property for. One, you cannot control cost of labor because it can go up. You cannot control the cost of materials because it can go up, as we saw in 2022. The market can tank, which it really hasn't tanked, but the market could tank within a year. And at that point in time, you can't control how much you're going to sell the property for. So it's very vital that you understand up front that you've got to be able to negotiate your purchase price and be the wholesaler to yourself. That way you dictate what you're buying that property for. Again, do you have enough reserves to get through the deal? If you don't, second guess yourself. Say, is this worth it? I'm not telling you not to pass on any deals, but or any investment properties, but at the same time, you don't want to get yourself into a situation to where the property is in a situation where you're not able to get through it, or you run out of funds to be able to complete that property, and then now you're in a disaster situation. Do you have enough wiggle room if the market changes like we saw in 2022? Meaning you got to negotiate your purchase price down as low as possible. That way you're able to have as much equity built in as possible. Is your lender charging upfront fees before closing? Hey, this is something y'all need to pay attention to. There are some lenders out there, not local lenders, but there are some nationwide lenders that are asking, and this is something they're asking you to send at least, I think it's a point to their wire a point up front before they even start. If you run across any lender that's asking you to do that, you need to grab your wallet, shut down your computer and your phone, and run and go tell somebody, okay? Because that is definitely fraud right up front, okay? And this is going around. It was going around a couple of months ago, and I'm still hearing about it. There's some fraudulent lenders out there, and you have to be careful, especially as an investor. Here's a real life example of how we lend. Let's say the property is a $300,000 ARV. We'll lend 70% of that, which is 210 plus minus 40 will advance 170 at closing. So your key, if you have a $300,000 ARV, is to buy this property somewhere around 170. That way you can be zero out of pocket. And yes, there are lenders out there that will do 100% financing. Jet lending is one of them. So if you're buying that at 170, all you're paying is closing costs. Now, if you buy it at 160, 155, we can roll the closing cost into that. You need to find, that's why I'm saying you need to build a relationship as an investor with a lender that can roll with you. Budget variable. Okay. So as I stated again, if you're buying the property for 150, client pays zero out of pocket. If you're buying it for 180, you would be out of pocket $10K plus closing costs and fees. So the key is to buy it as low as possible, build in that vitamin E, that equity up front. All right, here's where I really wanted to get to, and we're going to spend the majority of the rest of our time on. Mismanagement of contractors. That's probably one of the biggest issues that I see, is especially in the last 6 years. Oh, I gave my contractor 10K up front and he ran off, and now I've got to start over, which goes back to your liquidity issue. Like, those two go really hand in hand, because let's say that does happen and there's nothing you can do about it. He's going to claim that he did the work and you didn't pay him on time and he's just done. What are you going to do? He can go put a lien against your house. The only thing you can do is take him to small claims court. Are you going to, technically, you're going to spend more money on a lawyer than 10K to try to get your $10,000 back. Or, I guess you can hire a mafia member to go, cut his legs off. I don't know if that's worth your time. Just kidding, everybody. Don't do that, okay? But you've got to be able to manage your contractors and build those relationships. Keep good contractors working. Keep them in your back pocket. Always make sure that you're taking care of the good ones. And sit down with a few of them if you have not done an investment property yet, or if you're always looking for new ones. We've got a list that we can help you build that list. Of course, there's plenty of vendors out there, especially at our event that we have every month. We have, I think, 30 vendors in there that you can build relationships with. I always tell anybody that's doing a loan with us, make sure you interview your generals and subs. That way you can understand what the expectations are and make sure that you sit down and have a quality conversation with them about what your expectations are and what their expectations are. And set those boundaries up front, especially as an investor. Hey, I only get paid a draw when repairs are completed. So at the same time, you're only going to get paid when repairs are completed. I will buy the materials, but here's what we got to do in order to work together, and make sure that you're paying attention to that. Shoddy repairs, shady, whatever you want to call it. That's a huge issue. Not doing it the correct way. Educating yourself on repairs. Sit down with inspectors. Educate yourself on what is shoddy and what is not shoddy. There's a lot of times that you will go in and you'll see that the contractor is not doing things the right way. And that is a showstopper that can hurt you big time. Again, meeting those expectations and ensuring that you and that contractor have that conversation up front. Of course, we've already touched on this. Again, it's very, very vital. Making sure that you have enough cash to handle that rehab or that long-term refi. Let's say you've got $50,000, right, in the bank, and it's a $40,000 rehab. Well, yes, you may have the bare minimum, and you're like, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger. And let's say Jet Lending only budgeted because you did your due diligence, and you're doing a loan with any hard money lender or a private lender, and you get in there with your contractor and you start open up a wall, and guess what you found? Termite damage. Now you got to go in there and rip everything out and see how much termite damage. So now your repair budget just went from 40 to 70. Because now you got to go replace a whole bunch of termite damage on a whole back wall of the house. And that's going to cost you a lot more money because now you got to rip out all the sheetrock. You got to rip out all the bad termite damaged wood and replace it. That's going to add to your budget. Now you've only got budgeted that you held 40,000, but now you got to come out of pocket another 25 of your own money, 25 to 30. That can hurt you. That can put you in a desperate situation. Again, plans to hold but cannot get refinance done. There's several things that are showstoppers. Credit worthiness, that can be a severe showstopper. Starting it with all the great intentions that you want, that you're going to put this on lines of credit. I seriously advise against that. You need to have the liquidity to get through that rehab, and protect your credit score, especially if you're planned throughout that process. Don't go out and buy a brand new Lamborghini, because you've done turned into an investor, and now you got a huge car note, and and now your credit score is tanked. Or I'm an investor, I'm just going to go splurge and buy that expensive thing and put it on credit. I would highly advise not to do that. Of course, I'm joking. If anybody has a Lamborghini that's watching or in here, congratulations. Tries to do everything themselves, work and marketing, and does not hire a realtor. Let's kind of delve into tries to do everything themselves. Oh, I've seen it on HGTV. I can rehab this house all by myself. I don't need a general contractor. I'll just watch HGTV and they'll teach me everything I need to know. Okay, well, some of you might have that skill set, and that's great, but some of you don't. And the skill set of running electricity through a house is dangerous, for one. And number two, I don't recommend it if you've never done it before, because you will burn that house to the ground if you hook things up wrong. Running plumbing. Yeah, it may look easy and you may be able to do it yourself, but at the end of the day, if it's not plumbed correctly, you're gonna end up getting an inspection on the back end, especially if you're trying to sell it or if you're trying to get an FHA loan for a refinance. And at the end of the day, that FHA inspector, when they go and inspect it, if it's not done correctly, hey, you got to fix all these things, especially if you're trying to sell it to an FHA buyer. Doesn't hire a realtor. I would say when you're looking at selling a property, unless you have your real estate license, I would recommend that you hire a real estate agent that is actually in that area. Okay. And what do I mean by that? Oh, I've got a friend that's a real estate agent in the Woodlands, and she's going to list my house in Galveston. Not a great idea. Not a great idea. Yes, she may be the top agent in the Woodlands and may have $1 million listings and all that stuff. She may very well, or he or she may very well be able to sell your property, but they're not an expert in the Galveston market. They're not an expert at dealing with that. Now, if they have a team down there, that's fine. But if they're just concentrating and their majority of their business is done in the Woodland Spring area, then you want to find an expert in the Galveston area. That way they're able to know the market conditions, know who to market to and how to market to them to get your house sold in a timely manner. This has happened. We've had people in that exact scenario, and they'll call us and say, hey, I can't get this house sold. I'm like, well, okay, do you have it listed? Yeah, I've got a friend. She's up in the Woodlands, and she's selling this house. I was like, well, hold on. The house is in Galveston. She's like, yeah, but she's doing me a favor. She's not charging me, a fee, which is great. And it did eventually sell, but it took a very long time because she's concentrating on her business in the Woodlands and doesn't have time to go do showings or, open houses or stuff like that. That's why you need an expert in that area. I'm going to talk about this. ARV ends up being lower than anticipated. Can't sell as expected price. This is a major issue. That a lot of investors will shortcut the repairs. So, especially when you're dealing with a typically a hard money lender, they're looking at top of the market, like what would this property sell if it's fully rehabbed and fully coming up with the comps that bring it up to what I would like to call showroom condition 2023 standards, has all the new bells and whistles that a house would have, but you go in there and make it rent ready and expect to sell it at that higher ARV rate. This happens a lot. Oh, well, it's a clean rehab. Yeah, it's clean, but your comps that we looked at and we did the ARV on were based upon new kitchen, new countertops, new bathrooms, the fancy vanities. I don't know what they call them, but the what are those HUD ovens, gas ovens with the fancy glass and all that stuff. That's what it was based on. And here you are putting a $500 gas oven in here and saying, hey, it's ready to be sold. Well, that's not what's selling in that area. So your expectations are not meeting what the market is supposed to sell at. That will hurt you in the long run. It will hurt you. So if you look at the appraisal dealing with a private or hard money lender, you need to ensure that you're looking at the comps that they used in that appraisal and make your property during the rehab look as much like the repairs in that property. That happens a lot. Not as much as you think. I'm not trying to tell you that everything runs off the track, but there are unrealistic expectations that some investors have that don't meet the requirements of the ARV that we loaned against, or that a private or hard money lender lends against. Cost overruns. Have y'all seen this going around? It was on the news here lately. I forgot the name of the guy, but I know him. He had all of his appliances stolen out of a rehab that he was doing in the Heights. It made the news. And he caught the thieves like in his driveway. I don't know if anybody saw this, but it hit the news. I was like, this is amazing. So when the property is almost done, that is when you're most likely to have vandalism or thieves. So you need to make sure that you're paying attention to that, because that can cause cost overrun, especially if you're almost done with the property, almost ready to list it, and boom, somebody comes in there and steals all your appliances. And trust me, it's happening. So I always recommend that you put cameras up. That way you can make sure that excuse me, so you can make sure that nobody's coming in there and stealing your stuff. This is what this investor did. He had noticed that, somebody broke in, and the neighbors alerted him. And the next night they came back, and the neighbors weren't there, and he had a camera set up and caught him on film. They backed up to the door, loaded up all of his appliances, and took off. Luckily they caught him, but yeah, it made the news. So make sure you're paying attention to that, because that can be costly. Remember when I was talking about building relationships with your contractors? If you don't build those relationships, contractors are within their rights to put liens on your property. Everybody know that? Now, this is not to scare you by no means, but if they claim that they can prove that they did work and you didn't pay them for that work, and they can prove that, they can go put a lien on your property. And it's very hard to get those liens released. It's very hard. We deal with it not on our side, but like when we're trying to close the transaction. Because at the end of the day, we'll go, let's say it's a mid rehab that somebody's selling or whatever. We've had a few of them in the last couple of years that I've seen the contractor go put a lien on, and we can't close the transaction because the previous owner didn't have his contractors lined up correctly, and they went and put liens on the property. So it takes forever to get that lien paid off or satisfied, because now the seller has to go meet with him. It's already a bad situation, but they have to come up with an agreement like, hey, look, and that can take time. That can delay your process. So if you're buying a property that's a mid rehab or anything like that, make sure you have that conversation with your seller. Say, hey, I need to make sure that you have invoices paid in full with all your contractors, and make sure that there's no liens on this property. That way you can cover yourself. And if he can't provide that, say, well, I need to make sure that you have a release of liens from all of your contractors. That is very important, because you could sit in escrow on title for months trying to get that cleared up. And the last thing you want to do is put earnest money on a property that's tied up with liens on it, when you could be closing on 3 or 4 more properties, that hit your desk. Insurance. This is why I said you need to build a relationship with insurance company. If you're not using a hard money lender and you're looking out to use your IRA, which you can use your IRA to fund, you can fund investors. You can use your IRA to help investors as a private lender. So make sure that you're also paying attention to, fire and flood, and make sure that the proper insurance is in place. Biggest thing is flood insurance, because we experienced that in Harvey, where some properties that never were going to flooded, which, it's been remedied now, but you got to make sure that, you've got your proper insurance in place and make sure that that's taken care of. Now, you guys, if y'all do have an IRA with Quest and y'all are looking to maybe use some of those funds to get a return, you can use your IRA to be a private lender. Now, why is a hard money lender up here telling me that I can use my IRA to do this? Well, it's all about education. There's plenty of business for everybody. But if you've got $200,000, $300,000 sitting in an IRA that's not doing anything, why don't you use it as a private lender to get out there and fund some deals for people? That's very lucrative for you. You get to dictate the terms. You can say, hey, look, I'll loan this money out at 12%. You pay me, 2 or 3 points on the back end. You can dictate those terms. You can act like your own little private hard money lender, which can be very lucrative for you. I dare say that you don't want to take advantage of that, especially anybody watching or anybody in this room, that if you've got money just sitting on the sidelines, go put it to work. Get you 8 to 9% return in a year. But one thing you got to do as a private lender, you got to make sure you're not dealing with just your average everyday person. You've got to sit down and vet anybody that you want to work with. But there's a lot of great people in this industry that if you build that relationship and if you trust them and grow to trust them, it's make them show you what, their plan and stuff like that, and make sure you underwrite it the right way. If you're able to do the underwriting, and which, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help you underwrite it, or ask the right questions, or do the right things if you're not knowledgeable enough on how to underwrite that, so that that you're protected. I would dare say that anybody that's got money that's sitting in an IRA not doing anything, you're sitting on the sidelines for nothing. So don't do that. Huh? Facts, yes. All right. So I'm not supposed to be talking about jet lending or anything like that but you can find me on TikTok. A lot of contents on there. I am the real estate veteran. The real estate veteran on TikTok. This is my contact information. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. I'm pretty much anywhere. Instagram as the real estate veteran. I don't know. I have to change it so many times to make them match up. But call me. There's my direct phone number and my office phone number. Be more than happy to help you with your financial goals and trying to get you to where you need to be. Again, we're all here to make money, and we're all here to accomplish a goal of building long-term financial freedom. At this time, we'll take some questions. I don't know if there's any online, but we got one right here.
Real fast, sorry. I want to make sure people online here. So I have this cube.
Oh, the cube.
Oh,
That's cool.
that is. I have a question. If you have a property that's already paid for,
Own it free and clear.
own it free and clear.
Okay.
Is there a way to take money out of that and lend it as hard money?
There's a way to, 2 ways. You can do short term, cash out refinance with a hard money lender, and you can use that money for 12 months and then pay it back. So to answer your question, yes. Or you can do a long-term refinance on that property as long as there's a tenant in place. I don't know what you're doing with that property, but it has to be an investment property. So the answer is yes, you can. And we could talk about that in more detail. But yes, you can do a long-term or short-term loan, depending on how long you want to put those funds to work. So basically, if I'm understanding, you want to pull cash out and use that cash to invest.
Well, or to lend out at a hard money rate.
Yeah.
But I guess there would be some kind of spread there, right?
Yes.
On whatever. Because I wouldn't take a loan out myself with hard money and turn around and lend that out. I'd have to finance it, say, for 30 years and then rent it out to get like a 5 or 6% spread.
Well, what I would do is I would put a 30-year note on it and get as much cash out as you want and use that money. Now, you can give that money to Jet Lending and we'll give you a return on it. We accept private money as well. But again, you can use that money to invest any way you want. But to answer your question, yes, you can. Any other questions?
Any questions online? No online questions? Anyone here in person?
Oh, come on. There's got to be some questions. Did y'all get something out of this today? Yes? Okay. I will tell you.
Question, real quick. Sorry to interrupt. That's kind of what my dilemma is I've got a couple of properties that are paid for, and so I have a lot of equity in those two properties. I was just trying to figure out how to gain better return other than just.
Well, are they rented out right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the equity that you're sitting on is not doing you any good. Yes, yes, you've got a huge spread probably coming in on cash flow every month. But if it's sitting there with a lot of equity and you can use that money to either put towards some more properties to buy, which I highly recommend, that way you can build your portfolio of rentals. I would do that. That's what I would do. I would cash out both of those as much as you feel comfortable doing and use that cash to go buy more rentals. The key is 5 rentals in 5 years. 5 rentals in 5 years and keep them for 5 years. So within 10 years, you should have close to $1 million. To me, that's a huge profit. Because over 5 years, you have a renter in place, they're going to buy down your principal balance or pay down your principal balance for you. And then within 5 years, you can cash. And it's a 10-year plan, but in that 10 years, you'll have 5 rentals that are almost paid off that you can literally cash out and walk away and be like, hey, I'm going to Bermuda or Cabo or somewhere, and I'm going to sit on the beach and let this $1 million pay me 8 or 9% every month, either in an IRA or some other vehicle that you're using to have that, what I call mailbox money or retirement money, come in every month. So that's what I would do.
So we have actually several questions now online.
Okay.
They just needed to get the party started.
I just needed to motivate them.
Yeah.
All right, good.
So we have a couple of really quick ones, and then a third one that looks like it has a couple of questions to it. So Thomas asks, what are the rates looking like in today's market?
So are we talking about short term or long term? So I'll hit on both.
Yeah, hit on both. See which one.
There's a big misconception about long-term rates versus short-term rates versus long-term investment rates and short-term rates. So the Fed, everybody's heard over the last year, the Fed keeps raising the rates, going up a basis point, 50 basis points. If y'all don't know what a basis point is, that's basically a percentage of 1 point. So 50 basis point is a half a point. So your short-term rates, which is what affects your like hard money, that's controlled by the Fed. And when they go and meet, we cringe because we're like, oh, there goes what we call our gap between what we're borrowing our funds from and what we can lend it out at. And that gap gets narrower and narrower every time they meet. So puts us in a position to where we have to we have to raise our rates. So typically, good investors for short-term money, 12 months, we're at 3 points at 11.9%. Now, your 30-year mortgages, everybody's like, oh, well, that's ticking down. Yes, your 30-year mortgages are ticking down, but that's based off your 10-year treasury. And that's totally not dictated. It is a little bit affected by short-term rates, but not as much. That's why it gets confusing. But your 10-year treasury note is what dictates your Freddie, Fannie Mae regular mortgages. That's what, and they're somewhere around the 6%, I think now. High sixes. I should have done my homework before I got here, but that's what they were about 2 weeks ago. Now, DSCR loans. This is a total different market. This is money that Wall Street pulls together. Investors, insurance funds, all this other investment funds that they put together, and they say, we're going to put, $1 billion out this year. And they give us access to that and be able to deploy it for them. But we have regulatory guidelines that we have to fall under, like, hey, it has to meet a certain DSCR, like has to hit 1.2 DSCR or better. And your rents you have to have a renter in place. There's a little bit more stricter guidelines that you have to follow. And those rates are floating somewhere between 7 and 8 right now, because that's what Wall Street wants their return to be. Again, it's investment money. They get to dictate what they want to put this 30-year note on. So I hope that answers the question.
Perfect. Now, I'll just ask this, honestly, this last question for time's sake, because the rest of them seem like they're more geared toward jet lending.
Okay.
And specific ones. But this one, Bill asks, what trends are you seeing in the market today? What are your top 3 ways to get hurt as a private money lender in this market?
Hurt as a private money lender?
That was the word that was used, yes.
Well, I mean, as we went over, way you get hurt is not underwriting that file the right way, especially as a private money lender. Not doing. I'll tell you a war story. I was on a bus tour, and one of my clients came up to me and said, "Rob, I should have listened to you." I was like, "Well, what's going on?" They said, "Well, you wanted to order an appraisal, and we needed to close quicker, and we didn't think you could get it done fast enough." Which I was like, "Hold up now. I can get things done pretty fast. I don't know what you're talking about." They're like, "We just, we needed to close." And I'm like, "Okay, well, tell me what happened. What's the worst?" They went with another hard money lender that, did not require an appraisal order, did not underwrite the file correctly, in my opinion. That's my opinion, not, anybody else's. So they went to go refinance the property. And on the refi, they had to bring $60,000 to the closing table. Tell me why. They did an excellent rehab on this property. Excellent rehab on this property. It was in top condition. It's not because the market failed. It's because they lent too much money on the front end, because they did not have a proper analysis of the property, and they did not order an appraisal to verify what their numbers really were. And that hurt them. I hurt them on the back end by $60,000. Imagine thinking that you have got a great investment property you spent a lot of money on, and this is going to be an awesome short-term rental for you, and you have to bring $60,000 to your refinance because you're blindsided, because you did not underwrite that property up front. So as a private money lender, we could sit down in my office, and I will, I don't mind sharing what I think you should do to underwrite that file effectively to protect yourself. And hopefully you'll send me some business. Hopefully.
Okay. All other ones on here look like they relate more so to jet lending. So for the sake of time and networking,
all of those questions, if you have questions, you can text me those questions to my direct number, and I'll try to answer them today. You can text me anytime, night or day. Don't call me too late. I got three little girls, and they occupy my time after 6 o'clock. So, but I will answer your questions whenever I can. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you today. Thank you so much for allowing me to come teach you a little bit and have some lunch with you. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much, Rob. And thank you everyone for joining us here in person as well as everyone online. Before we get into the deal pitching session, to close the day out, with just a few announcements that we have. For those of you not familiar with Quest events, we do have a Houston social that takes place on the first Tuesday of every month. So next Tuesday, we will have that event here in person. We are running a raffle for Houston rodeo tickets. So if you are here in person, you could be entered to win 2 of those tickets to the rodeo. Same kind of idea. We have education, food, networking, things like that. So please join us. It is 6:30 is typically when it starts. Education's around 7:30. So you know when to get here a little bit later. But let us know if we can help out there. Eventually, we are going to be putting out some education as well for our MTA boot camp. This is taking place downtown in Houston in Rice, at Rice. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about how you can build a tax-free wealth, that's really what we'll be focusing on. So we're going to go over a lot of alternative investments. There is a slight focus on oil and gas investments. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to talk to any one of the Quest specialists here today. We'll be very happy to get you signed up for that. But that is about all we have. So if anyone would like to start us off for deal pitching, I can pass along the mic to you. No takers? All righty. Well, with that said, there is still some food in the kitchen. Feel free to stop by and grab what you'd like before you leave today. Again, we thank you all for coming out for today's event. See you next time.